Linda can chime. So with that, I am going to introduce Janet Porter, who will be conducting the interview with John Warley. And Janet, it's wonderful to see you again after a long, hot summer. And you have moved into Tide Point and you're doing well. And actually, you said you're going to be seeing John a lot because he's going to be the subject of your book club at Tide Point, and then the Legal Volunteers of the Low Country has him in person about this wonderful book. So with that, I'm going to hush and let you take it away. All right.
Thank you so much, Robin. It's good to see you, and I hope your surgery goes well next week.
Okay, thank you.
This is just a reminder that we want you to participate by asking questions of John Warley, and you can do that either in the chat function or in the question Q&A function, but please feel free to jump in and ask him questions. Now, I am going to sound like a raving fan, and I am. We had John Warley on about 2 years ago on his book Home Guard, but his latest book is called The Jury of One. And John was first introduced to us by Jonathan Haupt, who many of you know as the executive director of the Pat Conroy Literary Center. John Warley is a native South Carolinian and attended the Citadel, where he happened to have Pat Conroy as a fellow cadet classmate. He graduated from the University of Virginia Law School and practiced law in Virginia until 1993, where he moved when he decided to move part-time to Mexico to write and teach. He's now a full-time writer who divides his time between Beaufort and San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. John was recently honored by the Citadel, who gave him an honorary degree in Doctorate of Letters. And he was awarded that because of several things. First of all, he made a major contribution to the Citadel War Memorial at the Citadel. And he also wrote the history of the Citadel called Stand Forever, Yielding Never, the Citadel in the 21st Century. So John, please join me now.
All right.
John, good to see you.
Me?
Are you at your home in Beaufort?
I am indeed.
Yeah, that's terrific. So I'm so excited that you're doing this. So I just want to tell everyone that I read The Jury of One and I loved it. And I was member of a book club at South Carolina Yacht Club, and we read The Jury of One, and people said afterwards that it was the best discussion we had had about a book in 10 years, because this is a really complex, compelling book that has incredible themes and dimensions to it, and is a really interesting book, not just to read, but you're going to want to talk to other people about it after you finish it. So the book is a legal thriller filled with moral dilemmas and secrets and loyalties, and you simply cannot put it down. So this book comes with a warning. Be prepared to read it in one sitting because it is unputdownable, in my opinion. So John, let's give our WAHHI members an idea of what Jury of One is about.
Gosh, Janet, I don't know what to say after that intro. That's pretty, I need to make you my agent and put you on the payroll. You're hitting it out of the park there. I'm terribly happy to be back with you all. Delighted to be here and delighted to have an opportunity to talk about the book. This has been, of all the books I've written, the most curious as to how it came about. I was, not long after law school, a prosecutor for a year in Newport News, Virginia, and I drew on my experience as a prosecutor to write this book. So I was writing about some stuff that I knew about. But as to the specifics of how this story came about, I'm still scratching my head a little bit, because when I began it, it was about 1998, I was one of 23, 24 lawyers in a Richmond, Virginia law firm doing civil litigation, not doing any criminal work. And there must have been a story in the local newspaper about convicts who were serving life sentences without any hope of parole. There must have been some public discussion of that, which planted an idea in my head about, well, suppose, what about all those people that have been in prison for decades and have no escape except to die? And I came up with this idea about allowing them what I've been calling their early out option, which would be basically assisted dying in the prison with the blessing of the prison and the state. And I thought that I would research this topic. Once the idea was born, I thought I would research the topic. I couldn't find anything on the topic, so I talked to some of my law partners who were doing criminal work. I wasn't. Nobody had ever heard of it, which I thought, well, that's pretty unusual. So I started writing this, and I was living in Middlesex County, Virginia. So I set the book in Middlesex County, Virginia. I had my judge, the same Dan Borders, the same man who is the judge and jury of one. And I had Alana, the school teacher, and I had Jillian Pillai, the prosecutor. I had the characters in place. I wrote 5 or 6 chapters. I was feeling really good about the way the book was going. And then something must have happened. I don't remember what. Maybe I got pulled into a big case in the law firm that took all my time. I don't remember what happened. But the next thing I knew, I looked up, and it was COVID in 2020 in Beaufort. And I am sitting at my computer going through an old thumb drive, and I spot a folder labeled Jury of One. And I'm thinking, what is that? And so I opened it up. And of course, as soon as I started reading, the story came back to me. And I said, well, this is really a good story. Why did I drop this? Well, I don't know why I did. I still don't know why. But the point is, I took that time to finish it. And because I moved to Beaufort in 2005, I said, I'm not writing a story set in Middlesex County, Virginia. This story is going to be in Beaufort. So I was able to incorporate Beaufort pretty easily, to tell you the truth, because actually there's some similarities in Middlesex County that's surrounded by water and some other things. Anyway, I thought, I thought it would be good to have it set locally where I could walk out my front door and see the flora and the fauna and for descriptive purposes and all of that. So it worked out, I thought, very well, and I was very pleased with the way the book turned out. And I appreciate you mentioning the levels, because I have appeared at a lot of book clubs, give a lot of talks. And one of the things I'm always pleased is when the readers appreciate the levels of tension that are in the book. And let me just mention one. First of all, let me say it's not a question about it's not a book about the death penalty. The judge has certain theories about the death penalty. He doesn't like it, but it's not a book centered on the death penalty. It's centered on this bargain that the judge and this school teacher make on the worst night of their lives. For each of them, the worst night of their lives, it's the night that her ex-husband is killed. The judge and the school teacher are together and they make a pact. And each of them have to rely on the other to keep that promise. And that's the central tension of the book.
So how many years was it, John, between when you wrote that first chapter and when the book got published?
Well, let me do some quick math. 24 years, maybe?
That's what I, yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
We've also talked, John, before, because you mentioned that while you were doing this also, we had this interesting case going on here called the Murdoch case.
never heard of it.
Yeah,
Never heard of it.
which also happened to get a lot of, national publicity, and takes place in Beaufort County, so.
Well, and not only that, but let's not forget that unless his appeals are successful, Alex Murdaugh will spend the rest of his life in prison without hope of parole, which is a central theme of the book. And
Yes,
I think Alex is something like 55 or 56. Um, you know, so, and the timing was pretty amazing. I think the book came out in April of a year ago, and Alex's trial was wrapping up right at that time.
was it?
And I remember going out and jumping in my car one day, and I said, I got to get to Walterboro to see what all this is about. So I drove to Walterboro and caught some of the trial. And
Did you?
yeah, I did. And the timing of the whole thing was just really spooky. And I'll give you this footnote. A few months ago, I was asked to give a talk on jury of one to the South Carolina Circuit Court Judges Association. And they specifically wanted to hear about this book. And of course, I was delighted to tell them. And after I finished my talk, I was selling and signing books. And a man came up to me and bought a book and asked it to be inscribed. And I couldn't help but note that it was Judge Newman of the Murdaugh trial who wanted to take the book home and see what it was all about. So
Oh
I
my
haven't
gosh.
I haven't had a chance to, because he became famous. He was almost as famous as Alex Murdaugh.
Yeah, yeah. And you're a lawyer from the area. He's a lawyer from the area. You don't know each other, right?
Yeah, no, we don't. But I never practiced law in South Carolina. My
Yeah,
license was always in Virginia. So I never practiced law here. So I know lawyers socially and casually, but I don't know them professionally. So
yeah, yeah. So, it's interesting because I loved A Southern Girl, which I think is that your bestseller?
yes,
Yeah, I loved A Southern Girl, which I know is a little bit autobiographical. So I would highly recommend that, A Southern Girl. Linda, if you would type that in the webinar chat, that would be nice for everybody. But this is really your first legal book that where although you're a lawyer, was this book easier to write or harder to write because of the legal background?
it was easier to write. The Home Guard that Robin mentioned earlier, I that's historical fiction set in the Civil War, during the Civil War here in Beaufort. Those take a lot of research. Readers are very history conscious, and they know when your facts are wrong. So it took a lot of research. This, because I had been a prosecutor, and although there've been some changes in the criminal procedure laws in the 50 years since I prosecuted, it was still basically the same. So my work as a lawyer really did come in handy on this.
Yeah. Um, and could you just do a little description of A Southern Girl, just for people's interest, since I just promoted it to the group?
Yeah, sure. Um, my wife and I had two biological sons, and my wife came to me one day and said, well, you want a daughter, right? And I said, well, of course I want a daughter. What dad wouldn't want a daughter? And she said, well, we can't have a daughter the way we had the boys. And I said, well, you don't know that. She said, I know that. So I said, well, what are we going to do about that? And she said, we're going to adopt a daughter, and we're going to get her from Korea. So I thought Barbara had lost her mind, but months and a couple of years went by anyway. So it turned out that's what we did. And the book is about all of the reservations that I had about this idea, and then how I resolved those reservations and how it broadened my life in ways that I could only describe in 400 pages. So it's really a story about international adoption and a Southerner coming to grips with a foreigner.
Yes. So I want to read one of your recommendations for the book. In Jury of One, John Warley takes on the ultimate moral dilemma. A judge in a small Southern town, a decent and highly respected man of honor, is torn between doing what is right and doing what is just. His decision will not only affect the lives of others, but also change the kind of person he sees each time he looks in a mirror. This fast-paced, skillfully rendered courtroom drama is filled with all too human characters who speak to that struggles all of us face in the age-old battle between right and wrong, justice and injustice. And that recommendation was written by Cassandra King, who many of you know is the wife of Pat Conroy. So let's talk about this notion of the moral dilemmas in the book for everyone and how you wove all that, how you, it's interesting to think about how you wove all that together. Do you write where you have an outline for everything and you know how it all ties together, or does it evolve organically? How do you write? Because this book needed a lot of tying together.
Well, thank you. Yes, it did need a lot. And I write more organically. I don't work from an outline. I work a lot on inspiration, but I tell you, I rewrote, I'll bet I rewrote the first chapter a dozen times or more, because the first chapter is absolutely key to the book. That is where the ex-husband is killed, and it's where the judge and the school teacher make their pact. And if you think about it, they're just there. They happen to be there on that occasion, and they make this solemn commitment, kind of like people make a commitment, say they're getting married. You know, you're making certain vows, and you're relying upon your spouse to honor those vows. And you know that your life is going to be very different if your spouse doesn't honor their vow. And the spouse knows the same thing about you. It's high stakes with those promises. And that's basically the position that the judge and the school teacher were in. Each of them knew that their lives were going to be, if not totally ruined, severely adversely affected unless the other person kept their promise. And as the book goes on, and as each of them have reasons to believe that the other person is not keeping their promise, and you can imagine the anxiety and nervousness if you suspect that the person you're relying upon is not holding up their end of the bargain, then that builds quite a bit of tension, particularly if one of them has prison waiting for them and the other one has public disgrace and humiliation and career ending. These are the tensions that really drew me to the book. And so I was pleased with the way that worked out.
Yes. Many of our readers know Patty Callahan Henry well, and she wrote, from the first page to the last, Jury of One is a page-turning thrill of a ride. Atmospheric and compelling, John Warley knows how to immerse the reader in a Southern world where trust, betrayal, and secrets collide. Suspenseful and absorbing, Jury of One is your next can't put it down thriller. So how do you craft a book where the reader can't put it down? Because you clearly did that in this book where, you know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're halfway through the book and you're thinking, I got to put this down, but you just want to know what happens next. What is the trick of the trade in as an author that keeps that quest to read the next page, read the next page.
Well, in one sense, that's a little like asking someone, how they paint. I mean, a painter has, that you don't know exactly, but there are techniques. And to me, the fundamental technique is character, the building of characters. You have to care about what happens to those folks, and you have to establish it, particularly with today's readership. People read a lot of books. You have to establish that bond early, and they don't always have to love the character. They're bad characters. As long as you care about what happens to the character, I think you can build a story that builds with tension, and follow the second commandment, that thou shalt not bore. And a lot of times in the middle of the journey, you'll figure, I don't know if I would have the patience to read through this either, so I'm going to edit it or delete it. I try to keep my chapters short. I try to keep the story moving, and I try to keep it moving in a linear progression. I've read a lot of books. I'm sure everybody on this call has, of people that jump back and forth in time. And I like a story to start, unroll in front of me, and then have an ending. And that's the way I write. So for better or worse.
So let's talk about characters, because here you are living in Beaufort County. The book's in Beaufort County, and everyone wonders, I know, of all your friends, and is speculating on who Dan Borders is based on, or who Elena Morgan is based on, or Jillian Palal. So are your characters based on some notion of a real person that you may know as a friend, or just from a distance, that you model do you model your characters after somebody who's a real person that either intimately or just kind of are familiar with?
Judge Dan Borders is not modeled on anyone I know, but he is a composite of some judges that I've had the pleasure of practicing in front of, who I had a high regard for. So he's a composite character. Early in my law practice, I had a law office next to a lawyer named Alana, and it's not particularly memorable, except I liked her name, so I borrowed it for a jury of one. People have asked me if the Indian prosecutor, Jillian Palai, was possibly based on Nikki Haley. And I think it's an interesting question. And I remind them, and I had to remind myself, that when I started the book and first conceived the idea, the character of Jillian Palai, was in 1998. I had never heard of Nikki Haley in 1998. But I did have this, I like the idea of having an ethnic prosecutor, and I liked someone out of the mainstream of the community they were practicing in. I wanted that element in the book. I thought it created a little more tension. And so I really ended up loving Jillian, and but she's not related to Nikki Haley in any way.
I wondered that. And it's interesting. We have a friend in WAHHI, a woman named Luann Rosenfeld, who writes musicals. And she has a musical called Divided, which is very wonderful musical. And she talked about how when she was getting reviews from people, that one of the reviews that really struck with her is that they said to her, the stakes for your characters aren't high enough. The stakes have to be high enough. That's what creates tension. And the stakes are high in this book for all your main characters, for all of them, for Dan Borders' wife, for the neighbor who helps him. So is that a concept that drives your thinking also?
It is, and I'll tell you a short story about how that came about for me. I wrote my first novel in my early 40s, and the only person that I knew on the face of the planet that I thought would give me an honest opinion of whether or not it was worth anything was Pat Conroy, my old college buddy. So I sent it to Pat, and one of Pat's comments before he said he loved the book and he was going to send it to his agent in New York. Before he said that, he said, I think you ought to think about how you could go through this book and raise the stakes. He used that specific term,
Wow.
raise the stakes. And it's a good thing to keep in mind. I have, a few rules for writing, and one of them is raise the stakes. So that's a natural tension creator.
Yeah, I just hadn't heard that thought before, and it made me reflect on the musicals and plays and everything I've watched, and how much that played a role. So another big theme in this book is ambition. And did you intend for a lot of the characters? So did you intend for that to be one of your major themes in the book? Because it seems when I've talked in book groups about it, people said that was a driver of so many of the people's motivations.
Well, particularly for Dan Borders, yes, ambition is a major theme for him. And just to review without spoiling anything for those who haven't read it, Dan Borders crafts this novel idea for dealing with felons who are sentenced to prison with life without hope of parole. And his suggestion is that the state put a small chamber in the maximum security facility where a prisoner sentenced to life without parole, upon reasonable notice and after talking to some counselors and after being confirmed as not being crazy, is allowed entry into that chamber and is allowed the pharmacological means to take himself or herself out of their sentence. And that's his idea. And because the idea is novel, he gets a lot of publicity, and the publicity pushes him into position as a leading candidate to become the Chief Justice of the South Carolina Supreme Court. So this is his ambition realized if he can get to the Supreme Court. And his ambition and his dream is on the line from chapter 1, when there's this confrontation and Alana's ex-husband is killed. So yes, ambition certainly. And then Jillian is in an elected political office. She's what we in Virginia call Commonwealth attorneys, which are elected in Virginia. In South Carolina, they're solicitors, but they're also elected. So she has a political future on the ballot. So ambition is important for her. Alana has come from a very disturbed childhood and home life, a dysfunctional family, and her ambition is really much more limited. She wants to be a good teacher. She wants to be a good mother to her daughter, and she wants to live a happy life. Her ambition is more limited, but her passion is every bit as strong as the other characters. So I mentioned early in this chat that my law partners had never heard of this idea of this early exit strategy by a prison. And when I took the novel back up in 2020, I said, surely by now, 22 years has passed, surely by now this idea has been kicked around. Again, I couldn't find anything on it. And I was nearing the end of the book, right at the end, and I came across on the internet an article out of Switzerland. And it was a PhD dissertation written by someone whose PhD thesis was, under Swiss law, a prisoner in a Swiss prison had a constitutional right for the state to help them in assisted dying if that's what they chose to do. And this was the first discussion I'd ever heard of it publicly. I emailed the author of that PhD thesis and told him I was writing this book. I got a nice email back from him. And months later, he sent me a newspaper article. They had just had their first instance of a prisoner in Switzerland demanding of the prison. He said, I've had enough of this. You're not going to let me out. I want out, and I want to exercise my constitutional right to an assisted dying. And they contacted an assisted dying agency called Exit, scheduled his assisted dying on the prison grounds with the blessings of the prison. He had some family in, they set the day and time, and he checked out into the next life. It's a practical application of the idea that Dan Borders had that propelled him into the forefront of the race for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So it's all really very current. And in my research, one of the things I learned is most readers are shocked to hear this. As of 2020, there were over 1,400 juveniles in the US court system who have been sentenced to life without parole, some of them as young as 14. Think about the life expectancy of a 14-year-old today with modern medicine. You're talking about a 70, 80, 90-year prison sentence. Now, have they done horrible things to justify being incarcerated? Absolutely, they have. But at some point, you wonder if something won't have to be done about that. And there are, it's an evolving conversation, which I think gives the book a little bit more currency than it might otherwise, than a normal legal thriller might have.
Yeah, I think it does too. So, a lot of times a character in the book is placed. And this book takes place in Beaufort County, but it seemed to me that it could have taken place anywhere. It didn't seem that it was uniquely Southern. Do you feel that way about the book?
I feel like I could have said it in other locations for sure. It's not location dependent. I think Beaufort makes a lovely setting for the book, but it's not, and I'll contrast it with A Southern Girl. Half of A Southern Girl takes place in Charleston. That book could not have taken place, in my
That's right.
opinion, anywhere other than Charleston.
I agree.
So,
It's very Charleston.
but it is, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So that I often think of Charleston as a character in A Southern Girl, but I don't think in this book Beaufort is quite as dependent. The book is quite as dependent on Beaufort as a setting.
Yes. And, I have one of the people in the, one of our participants today who asked early on in this conversation if you were willing to join other book group discussions via Zoom.
I love book clubs. I love book groups. I can almost always find a place on my calendar to do them. So yes, the answer is yes. I'd love to do it. And Zoom is an easy way to do it. And for book clubs in north of the Broad, I mean, I always just show up. It's easy for me to do that. And to be frank, if I had to choose between in-person and Zoom, I'll always opt for in-person. But for example, in this setting, I can only see your reaction. I can't see the reaction of anyone who is within the sound of my voice and seeing me. And I like to read the room. I like to see whether people are engaged, whether they're bored, or whether they're looking at their watches or whatever. So but I do, the answer to the question, the short answer is yes, love it. Just invite me. Just email me at johnwarley@gmail.com and I will respond and love to match calendars.
And if people also want to get in contact with John, you can send me an email or, or a text. And I have John's contact information also. So John, I just want to say thank you so much. John knows we're going to be seeing a lot of each other in the next couple months because John is the featured author for the Low Country Legal Volunteer fundraiser, which is coming up in October. And then in November, we have a 45-member book group that's broken into 4 groups, but at Tide Point, and we're all reading Jury of One in November. And then John is coming to Tide Point as our holiday guest speaker. So we're going to be hanging out a lot together here in the next couple months, John. And I can't thank you enough for how terrific and responsive you are to your readers who become big fans.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And before we sign off, let me just mention that if anybody wants the book, I got the Shameless Commerce division of johnwarley.com will mention that all of my books are available on my website, www.johnwarley.com. Shipping is free, and I'll inscribe them, which is something you can't get from Amazon or a bookstore. So if anybody needs a copy, please just go to my website and I'll inscribe it and mail it out the next day, and you can we'll both be happy.
Yeah. Thank you so much, John. You're so gifted and so kind. Thank you.
I can't thank you enough. Enjoyed it very much.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
John.
All right. Thank you, guys. See you
Thank you,
soon.
John.
See you soon. And I mean that literally.
Exactly.
Good job.
Okay. Thanks.
Hey, Janet. Well, that was a lot of fun. I want to bring in Linda Jackson if she wants to say hi to everybody, and Bobby Helbig, the rest of our team. I don't know if they want they want to open their video, but I just want to thank our author series team. Next time will be our 40th webinar. There's Bobby. Hey, Bobby. And then Linda, we appreciate there's Linda. Hey, Linda. Thank you. That was a lot of fun. We want to remind everyone that, and I think that was a good point, that you can buy my book and going to my website or Amazon. But the most important thing is that with these authors, we want our readers, our viewers to buy the book. If you haven't read the book, that would be a real tribute to our authors that we bring
It
on.
really is, because when researching authors, most of them are thrilled to just do this, but it's hard sometimes to quantitate how many books they've sold, and that's part of their thing. And I reassure them that if they haven't read it before this, they usually get it afterwards, because it's just because you're like, well, should I? And then you hear the speaker, you're like, if you're anything like me, I'm like, boom, I go out and get it. So yeah, keep that in mind and buy their book.
And we want to remind folks, if you have any suggestions, Bobby is our booker, if you will, our book booker.
That was a good one.
And don't forget to go to the Pink Paper on Wednesdays with all the events that WAHHI has going on. Our next author series session is November the 14th. When this is going to be interesting. It's the trial of the century, and it's written by one of our own WAHHI members' husband, Kate Jarrett. Her husband's name is Greg, and he has written this book called The Trial of the Century. Have you read it, Janet?
Yes, I have. And Kate, bless her heart, recommended it to me for a while ago, but you have a stack of books you have to get through. And the interesting thing I think about this book is it's like 100 years later. And here we are with all these same discussions about book banning and what should be taught in schools. It's such a relevant, I think it's a great book, but it's so relevant for our discussions today. And I'm not sure everybody knows that 60 Minutes did a segment on Beaufort County and on the challenges that were going on to ban books in school libraries, not in the public library, but in the school library. And they really promoted the approach Beaufort County took as the model of how other school districts across the United States should think about it. So it's a really timely book, and I'm looking forward. I have not met Greg. I'm looking forward to meeting him.
All right, well,
Yeah.
that sounds exciting. That will be again on
I
November
was just going to, I'm
14th.
sorry,
Yeah,
plug the, this is the book that's coming, that we're doing in, yikes, where's my,
that'd be January.
in January.
Okay.
And the other book, which I lent to somebody, is coming up, Pam Weber. Yikes, I forget the title. I just have her author written down. Her,
That's okay.
anyway, I met her, I met both of them, and they're just fascinating. Their books were very good. This weekend, or the 28th, is the Low Country Book Festival out at the new technical school. So I'm going out to that, and I have
Okay.
three authors that I'm going to introduce myself to and tell them a
Very
little bit
good.
about WAHHI, and so stay tuned.
Okay, well, Bobby, thank you for your leadership in this effort, and Janet, our interviewer extraordinaire. And thank you everyone for watching this edition of the WAHHI Author Series, our number 39th edition. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks.
Now, Linda, the team stays on and has a little debrief. So feel free to get back on.
I'm on the public link.
No, Linda, you're not on the public link.
Oh, really?
Because if you were on the public link, you wouldn't be seen right now.
Oh,
You're
good.
in,
Okay.
you're in the right link. You're in
Okay.
the,
You're welcome to my world.
you're in your unique panelist link. It says
Yep.
Linda Jackson. So I saw your email that you thought you were in the public link, but you're in the right link.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay. So I thought first of all, I really want to welcome Linda to the team, but I also I thought I would just ask her, I don't know how many have you attended any of these before, Linda?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I think your fresh eyes are really important. And if there's anything you want to say that you think we could do to improve this process, please share your thoughts now, because we have always had a dress rehearsal, and we've always had a brief debrief to say, what do we want to do better next time?
I don't have any strong comments about that. How many did we have on today?
We had 31.
31, and I'm starting to keep track of that, write the name, and I don't know if when you set it up, if we know, but by the end, I kind of wait until the end, yeah, and I'm gonna start keeping track of how many write their name next to the author, see how many.
So Linda, you couldn't chat in?
No, the chat that I tried only gave me the option to chat with the hosts and the panelists. Not
Okay.
everybody else.
But Linda, this is my suggestion. I can chat to everybody because I'm the interpreter.
Right.
So for example, it would have helped if you would have written A Southern Girl by John Warley as the recommendation. If you chatted it to me, then I could forward that to everyone.
Okay.
I'm trying to
So-
think of how, yeah.
Nancy, I don't know why that's not working for you, but Nancy used to chat in things that we said, like if Robin said, I just read, the Brown book or whatever, then she would chat that in for us. So that would go to everybody. We had a problem with the chat function, but the chat function's working now, but it's still,
Yeah,
evidently still not working where you can chat to everybody. So you can chat to me and then I can send it to everybody.
Okay. Like I could have put in John Worley's website.
Yes.
Talking about buying
Yes.
a book or something like that.
Yes. John Warley at gmail.com, for example.
Or the date of the next session. That kind
Yes, anything like that. Anything like that, you would chat in, that would be terrific.
of. Okay.
Yeah, and just you could say, don't forget the date, which I usually
Right.
get out ahead of time and
Right.
put that and hope, people can read the book. That would be a good question. I'd be curious to see how many people read the book before and how many people wait and read after it. I don't.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
would be a good survey question. I don't know how you write that in, but just for the heck of, when I tell people that, I'm assuming that that's what they do for, the authors and everything. I said, pretty sure most of them, read the book. I do.
I
So
wonder how we could do that. And do we want them? Because it would be interesting to say, or how many of you who haven't read the book will now read the book?
can we
Well,
put that in
Linda,
the
I just want
chat?
to say, Nancy, we have done one big marketing survey, and I'm not going to remember exactly, but I think we did it 2 years after we were in business, so probably mid 2022. And one of the things we ask people is, do you like the time? Do you like the day of the week? And do you want to be in Zoom or in person? 84% of the people said they wanted to stay on Zoom.
Wow.
So, because we were debating whether we would do, other, in-person events, and we said, well, okay, so that market survey was very helpful, but it's been a couple years since we've done one, and Nancy did that from pulling up, I think, Linda, you can see who the people are who signed in.
I can. When you go to participants, yes, you can, and you go attendees. It shows 2 people are still there. But
Yeah.
it'll give you a whole list of the people.
At the time. During-
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Because that's how I
Yeah.
know, that's, how I counted that, but
So I think if we could figure out a way to keep track over the next couple webinars of the people who are in attendance. And Linda, I don't know if you could figure out how to do this, and then from downloading that attendance list, I don't know how to do that. And then send those people, let's say we get the names of 70 or 80 people, then we could do a market survey maybe early in 2025.
that would be an interesting idea. Yeah,
I think that's a good idea. We're overdue for doing that.
it's like, I think, I hope they don't change the date and time. But, yeah, that would help me in telling, well, I do tell them that, but, I'm assuming that's what happened, so. But it just would be, I'd be curious too, to see. But yeah, I'm going to the Low Country on the 28th, whatever they have out, the technical, from the Pat Conroy Center. So I've already got 3 authors that one is what I was going to say was 2, she wrote, she's going to be talking, it's called That Librarian. And it's all about banning books and not banning books. So I thought, especially you started talking about that at the end. So I thought she might be an interesting, it's more nonfiction, I think, but it was an interesting concept. So she's going to be there. The other one is an author named Kim Poovey, who's new to me. And who is the other one? And actually, Patty Callahan Henry has a new one, but, and it's
Yeah, I know
called,
what's her new one called?
it's not even out because I looked to see about, I had to
Oh,
start
did
a new
you?
page. Yeah, I had to start a new page in my, oh my goodness. The Story She Left Behind by Patty Callahan Henry. It's about a mom who disappears something and they have to go back and find the story. I was just kind of doing it. I was listening, wanted to listen to that. And there's another book called The Thing About Home. So I've got 4. I tried to get James Percival Everett, and he couldn't do that. Tried to get Kristen Hanna, and she's not going to do it. And the last one